My name is John Mangiapane. I hope if you have not already seen my segment on quilting, which was shot earlier, that you'll go back and onto the Apremont site and take a good look at that, especially if you like quilting and cross-stitch. If not, welcome. This is my segment on being a book author, some publishing, and some illustrating that I have done. Once again, I'd like to thank Apremont Productions and Bob. Thank you very much for this opportunity, for this shoot. And I'd also like to thank John Q. for the use of his mid-century modern house for us to shoot these segments in. Anyway, I did not start out to be a book author at all. Tell you the truth, I'm terrible using a keyboard. I have to use 3 fingers to type, but it didn't stop me. I did have my original book published by a real, honest-to-goodness brick-and-mortar publisher. Went through that entire process, which I used to do a lecture on about, getting that manuscript ready and, making copies of it all and sending it to whoever and waiting 12 weeks. And, it's a process, but I actually did luck out. I was able to get a book published that way. I thought the book was relatively successful, and it sold around 12,000 copies for me. It was, unfortunately, the company that produced it for me started downsizing, and downsizing means whoever wasn't making enough money to be the next Stephen King got cut, and they let my book go out of print, which was their error. But I was able to keep my copyright on it, which I found out was really very easy to do, and said, someday soon I'm going to have to turn around and republish this book myself. That would take probably a couple of years due to other projects I was doing, but I did look into how to be a self-published author and found out some parts of it are incredibly easy, some parts of it are incredibly nuts, they'll drive you crazy, but there's nothing to stop you from becoming a published author, but it does take some guts. We just published a 9th and I'm working on a 10th, and I will tell you, when I got my book back in a shape that I thought it could be published and went through the process, do not, I repeat, do not launch your publishing career on Friday the 13th. But I did, Friday the 13th, 2012. Ran into a slew of problems and ended up publishing 6 books in the next 9 weeks. No, I did not write 6 books. I had them already written and they were in my computer, but I learned the process of it. And now I publish at least 2 books a year. And last year I branched into a children's book, which I'll tell you the story about that. And I've just published a 2nd children's book, both on a Christmas theme, which is one of my favorite seasons of the year. The best advice I can give to anybody who wants to write a book is just write. Sit down and write. Do not try to be the next Ernest Hemingway. Do not try to be the next John Grisham. Just write. You'll be surprised what you can do. So they always tell you, work on anything you're working on. It should be something that you at least know something about. So one of the books I happen to create, if you've already seen the episode that I've shot about my quilts, is called The Quilt Project. And it came about in a strange way. A very, very good friend of mine who's no longer with us, one of the most creative women I ever worked with for many years and made many things to give her, and she made many things to give me, died very suddenly, and only child who had married an only child, her husband was already gone, and her relatives basically threw everything in her house away, threw her life away. And I said, no, I'm never going to let that happen to me or my stuff. So I started going through my personal files, and I created this book called The Quilt Project, and basically tried documenting everything that I had about quilts that I had made. So this is a really simple process that almost anybody can do. The problem will be, I'll tell you right now, who has high digital quality pictures from 25 years ago? You don't. You can have that overridden. You cannot retake your parents' wedding picture. It's just not going to happen. But the publishers can work with that. So I documented everything I wrote about, as I was also writing articles on quilting. I tried to include the best pictures I possibly could of the quilts that I still had. Had a friend who took some great shots for me. Thank you, Nick. And I comprised this book, which I hope has documented everything that I've ever done, including pillows that you've seen in the last episode, my quilts, my wall hangings, some wall hoops. This is all self-published. In case you're wondering, it's got really good quality paper. It has a really good quality full color cover. There are templates that you can use to create what you want. Yes, this really handsome fellow on the cover is me, probably 1970. Anyway, but you too can also create the covers to go with your own books. So this was a work of love. It's dedicated to my friend Roberta, who's no longer with us, because I decided I would document my life, and this is what I came up with. Odd thing that happened in that 9 weeks of work, my mother was very surprised that you could actually produce something this quickly. And my mother said to me, "Oh, have you ever seen Dad's World War II diary?" And it was like, "Sorry, Mom, I don't really think so." So she went digging through a closet and pulled out some of my father's stuff and pulled out this photo album, which I remember, and pulled out this little leather diary with the lock still locked with the little key. And I started reading through it. And a couple hours later, I finally said, Mom, this isn't exactly novel-worthy. I mean, Dad wasn't a spy. He wasn't in the Battle of the Bulge or any of that type of thing. But I said, I think I will translate it into a book form because members of the family would want it. So I did that. I started transcribing my father's diary into book form. And I came across, if I can find it in here, there's this picture, I hope I can find, of my aunt, who was only 5 years old at the time, walking down the street with a friend of my father's in uniform, and I found that picture in his photo album and said, oh, this is the catch. I can use pictures from World War II of his to help illustrate his story. So it's really not a very thick book. It's really not a dramatic read. My father did not get into World War II until practically almost the end of World War II, and he finished his term and left the service like in April, and the war ended in September. He was already home by that point. Nothing dramatic. Wasn't a spy, but this is the documentation. This is my father's World War II diary. It was a nice little piece. It will never be the bestseller, and I know it, but it documents my father and his friends. And there is one picture here in the back I made an addition to this book. There's a great picture of my father and his buddies that was taken. He was in Hawaii, although this is long after Pearl Harbor. We'll get a close-up of this later. There's a picture of him and his buddies, and there's a guy here on the ground whose name was Mac, and his wife is still alive. And my mother asked me to get a copy of this book to send to her, and then my mother passed away before she did, so I ended up doing it after she died. And his wife wrote me a letter about that, and I had to incorporate that into the book itself. Just nice to have another commentary from 70 years ago. It's all going to go away very, very soon. But nonfiction, and I hope if you're a World War II fanatic, you might have some fun reading it. Although, like I say, there's no big war secrets in this book. I did write a biography took me several years to compile. Memories of Mario, a friend of mine who's no longer with us. I documented 10 years of our lives together. And I did it mostly by using the dates on the backs of pictures, putting them in chronological order, and then turning it into story form. I did this because he died very, very quickly of liver failure. And I felt, I needed to do this for his memory. I cried a lot when I wrote some of this. It was tough to remember some of the things that happened. It was a lot easier looking at pictures saying, oh yeah, I remember that party, and oh yeah, in the background is so-and-so and so-and-so, I forgot about them. But it was enough to write this book from it. Am I writing bestsellers? No, but I'm writing books that are selling, and people do, enjoy them. But after I finished writing that initial flush of books, for some reason that Christmas, as we're getting away from paper Christmas cards and people are doing things electronically, I wrote a very short story, just as an inclusion, and sent it to everybody on my Christmas list. And it was cute and it was enjoyable. And a couple of people said, "Wow, that was really, that was really nice. Are you going to make it into a book?" I.e., because you already wrote books. And it was like, well, I never thought about that. And I've never also done children's books, which are a whole other story. But at the time, I was learning how to color in digital format, and it became very, very aware, if you're going to do a book for children, little children, it really needs to be a picture book, and I was never going to be able to afford to pay an artist to do it, which meant I had to learn to do it myself. Big learning curve on that. So I blocked the story out into what part of it should only be words and what part of it should have inserts for pictures, and started drawing. So I did, sit there and say, well, how many pictures of, a full page will I need? And I needed something like 14. There were other pages which didn't have words on them. They had words across from them, and I needed to create a full-size page. This one's 8.5 by 8.5. And suddenly I found myself tossed into the world of digital art creation. As you can tell from this, I'm not Michelangelo. There's times I really felt like using digital means to create art was like trying to paint the Sistine Chapel with a Q-tip, but we persevered on it. I turned around and released this book, which is called Cars with Trees on Top Mean Christmas is Coming. And it's an imaginary story, but it's about a little boy who knows when the leaves turn yellow and gold, autumn is coming. He knows Thanksgiving is coming. But when he sees cars with trees on top, he knows that Christmas is coming. And I fashioned that into this book, which I also told everybody about, because now everybody wanted to see it, and mailed several copies to several people, and also sold quite a few last Christmas. And in fact, a friend of mine in Canada wrote me a letter back, and she said, "Oh, John, that was just a fantastic story. It reminds me of this thing that happened to my mother when she was a little girl, blah, 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 blah." And she tells me this whole fantastic thing, and I said, stop. I said, what you just told me is a perfect children's book story. And I turned that into a short story last year, and I've just turned it into book form this year. And it's called Grandpapa Builds a Christmas Tree, entirely based on true family events in this woman's family, during the Great Depression in Canada. Yes, the Great Depression affected our neighbors to the north too. It turns out her grandfather had 7 children, my goodness, and had been a very successful man up until the Depression. And of course, when the Depression hit us, it hit them, and times got really tough, and he realized suddenly, like, it is Christmas Eve and I do not have a Christmas tree for my family. And according to the mother, he went out on Christmas Eve to places that sold Christmas trees and bought all the cut branches from somebody for a quarter and built a Christmas tree for his family. And I said, that is such a perfect story for a Christmas book. There are no illustrations, unfortunately, in Grandpapa. The Christmas trees on top is really aimed at preschoolers to be read to younger children, whereas Grandpapa's book is really aimed at middle schoolers who know how to read. There is some French in there. I hope my French doesn't upset anybody, because it's all done by Google Translate, because I don't speak French. But Grandpapa did have to throw in a few, can't even think of any of them off the top of my head, a few exclamations in French. So you might actually get a French lesson by reading this book. It's, as I say, Grandpapa Alexandra and Grandmama Adrienne are 2 very real people, and their picture is actually on the back, picture from the 1940s. I couldn't make up a story that's as good as this story really is. My other interest in publishing and writing is tarot, which kind of surprises some people. There will be another segment extra online where I talk about a tarot deck I designed, but I did write a book. This is actually the reprint of my original book. It's all in the cards, Tarot Reading Made Easy. Beginner's intro book. It has pictures. I tried to get the picture on your left page and the text on your right, make it easier to find things. My interest in tarot goes back way into the beginning of the 1990s. I don't know if that excites you or bothers you, but it is what I do. I do write what I know best. I did turn around this year and create, which also created another book. I created a book called No Reading on Sundays, Tarot Myths, Legends, and Tall Tales. And what was really funny, because even Bob doesn't know this, while we were setting up to do these shoots and whatever, he was under the impression I had more books on sewing than I actually do. And I came across some information I had forgotten I had in some of my files. So right now I am writing another book, book number 10, which probably will be out in the next 6 weeks. And it's basically a book on sewing legends and superstitions, which go on forever. There's a million superstitions about, breaking needles and, dropping your scissors and, not doing this if you're sewing a wedding dress. And I even found, which ties in too, I even found a whole bunch of superstitions that had to do with quilting and quilts. Such things, such important things as if you're making a wedding quilt, the last stitch should not be put in by an unmarried woman or she will never get married. Superstitions are very strange things. Just like to say, if you are interested in writing a book, there are many resources out there for self-publishing your book. If you do not wish or cannot go through that, and let me tell you, it's a long process between actually getting my original manuscript accepted and getting the book on the shelf in a bookstore took almost 2 years. Basically, now that I've figured out the insides for that sewing superstition book, I can probably have that book already up and put together as a sample to check it in the next 4 days. That's always an amazing thing. I will give you a word of advice. All of these books that I have self-published cost me nothing. The only thing I had to pay for, and it's very good advice, all the companies that produce self-published books will tell you, on your computer screen it looks like this, but you might want to see what it looks like in paper. You may not notice that you have your type on one page set at the wrong size pica, because on your screen you can't tell, but in print you can't miss it. You really should buy a paper copy. That's the only expense I've ever had. Realistically, your company helps you figure out the price. Is it got color inside? Is it black and white? The covers are all part of the cost. Once you get to publish your book, you just wait for the profit to come in. Will you be rich? Well, not unless your name is John Grisham or Stephen King, but you can get your books out there self-published as long as you have enough determination to follow through. Priority setting, getting help in case you are not literate using word programs, because everything is done electronically, and you will do it all from your computer, including designing your cover, templates, change the color, change the style, change the size of the picture. Do you want your picture on the back? Yes, no. All taken care of by clicking little tick boxes. So, have I made a fortune off this? No. I will tell you the truth, though. My original book, which sold for $9.99, and sold the 12,000 plus copies, I will tell you the truth. I made 38 cents off of every book sold. That's all I made. Self-publishing, you can also publish electronic books, so you can publish ebooks for Nooks or Kindles or whatever it is. There is no paper book anywhere. There's just an electronic file. You can make, if you sell a book that really sells well, you can make $4, $5, or $6 per copy and not 38 cents. Something to think about if you want to become a self-published author. My only other word of advice is you really need someone else to edit your own work, because you can't see your mistakes. But 10 books later, I'm still going to just keep publishing as long as I can find a subject interesting enough for me to keep writing about. Hopefully my skills will keep improving so I can do some art a little faster than I am. But publishing, I find, was almost as satisfying as sewing. But I always call myself a sewer. And I'm going to make a statement that will probably confuse you. I met an author several years ago who also had a very successful tarot book, and we were sitting down. I'll admit, we were drinking a lot of wine and eating a lot of chicken wings, and we came up with an idea which I couldn't agree with more. And we both agreed that both of our books, including my original book, really brings tarot as something for women. It really is, a majority of tarot books are written by women for other women to read. And both of us were guilty of the same thing. And it started me thinking, and I was like, how do you get rid of that Mr. Wonderful White Knight on a horse, the Shining Knight type of crapola, as I call it. I can say that on the air, right? How do you get rid of that? And it took me a lot of work. I had to take everything that I knew about tarot in general. I've been studying, I guess you can say, I've been studying and reading tarot since the early 1990s. And it took taking everything I knew about tarot and throwing it out a door and coming back in a window saying, how do I reinterpret what has already been written for hundreds of years strictly from a man's point of view? And that took me a lot of work. And I wrote a book called Every Man's Tarot, Tarot and the Male Experience. And I thought it would be a very, very good book, and I turned around and tried to get illustrations for it. and I ran into a big problem. You know, you must pay royalties for all of this. And I found out that the illustrations I had used on my previous tarot book, I could not reapply to this book. And the cost of those rights tripled or quadrupled. The company that owned the rights wanted literally my left arm and leg. And it was like, no, I got to do something here. So I drew my own illustrations. Now, I'm not an artist at all. So I had to sit down and draw. And I drew my own illustrations for the book. That was their original purpose. I had to have them reflect what I was trying to change and what I was trying to keep. I did not just take all the women in the tarot deck and throw them out and say, oh, they have to all be men. You still come up, even gay men deal with women in their lives. So I left certain cards that have no choice but are quite realistic, like the Empress as a woman, Justice as a woman, the World as a woman. I left those there. I left all the queens as women. I can hear snickering in the background. And I readjusted the rest of the deck to match. And that took some doing. Here it is. I created 4 characters. If you know anything about tarot, there's 4 suits, and rather than just having random people in a suit, I chose a man to go through that entire suit. And of course, if you haven't seen the other video or the other 2 videos, you know I have a big ego. I put myself in one of those suits. I am the man of pentacles in my little shorts and my little blue shirt. And I created for the cups a couple of different things. I ended up putting a man in a suit with the water symbols on it, and he started looking Native American, and I left him that way. I created, which I didn't realize at the time how much this looked like a friend of mine, Mr. Bear in his cargo shorts and boots and his flannel shirt as the suit of wands, and then I created Mr. Uptight Button Down as the man who creates all the cards in the swords suit. So for someone with no artistic talent, I created 78 illustrations in 30 days, which is monumental. So I put them in the book, got the book published, and sent it out to the world, and I'm actually not doing too badly with it. But it would take about another year because this is a different process than publishing. I took finally all of the illustrations and turned them into their own standalone deck. There we go. So I created the Everyman Tarot and took all of those separate illustrations and made them into cards. I'm hoping that you've gotten some enjoyment and some interest out of this segment. As I said, there's also a sewing segment that I've done on quilting. There are a couple of other extras that will be on the Apremont website, which you can look up, especially one aimed for men. I know that sounds so intriguing when you say it that way. Boys, check this one out. Girls, go ahead, check it out if you'd like to. Aim more at men. And I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to me talk, and I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to entertain you. Thank you very much.